Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Barbara Tien, welcoming you for Project Kin to another wonderful episode of Emma Explores. Joining me today is Emma Cox, whom you may already know from her Journeys into Genealogy podcast. And of course, she is a professional genealogist at emmacox.co.uk and joins us from her home in Kent in England to share, as she does each month, stories from her own family history. And along the way, she shares with us her strategies, her resources, and just some wonderful stories. Today, I couldn't help but be excited to hear stories about transatlantic trade in wool, as I recall, and as it picks up our American stories, things like pirates, Blackbeard, all kinds of good stuff. So without further ado, let me turn around and introduce you to Emma Cox. Good morning, Emma.
Hello, Barbara, and hello, everybody listening and watching this today. It's great to be here. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Just give me a moment. So today's topic is wool trade and piracy in the Upcott family. So this is a part of my family tree that I'm going to concentrate on today. So this is all down in the West Country in England. So a little bit of an introduction for anybody who doesn't know me. So I'm a family historian and genealogist. I help people find out about their ancestors, put together family trees, charts, investigate DNA, find living relatives, books, tours, all sorts of different things. And as Barbara mentioned, I've got my podcast. There's about 110 episodes on there now, just about. Today, we are going to be talking about wool and trade in Devon in England between the 1630s to around about the 1830s or 40s. And this is a very significant book cover, this picture on the right-hand side. It's called Tiverton Cloth, the story of the town's woolen trade from 1475 to 1815 by a gentleman called Peter Maunder. And my relative is actually one of the men, and he's shown on this picture on the front cover here. His name was William Upcott. We'll come to him a little bit later on, but discovering this book was amazing. We were on holiday down in Devon and we went into Tiverton and we went to the local museum and had a look round. And I knew that the Upcotts were involved in the wool industry and trading and in Exeter and things like that, but I didn't really know a great deal about them. So I bought this book, and it's not a small book. It's a bit A4 size. It's about 3 centimeters thick, really quite a big, significant book. And it sat on the shelf for a little while, and I didn't really do a great deal with it. And then when I started doing some research for this talk is when I discovered that it's actually packed full of information all about my family. Really, really fortunate. So the Upcotts lived in a particular part of Devon. They were in a place called Tiverton. So I've done a little arrow there, and also a place called Columpton. And those places actually used Exeter and a place called Topsham to send their goods out of the country. So this would be the local port. Exeter itself is actually inland, and so they would have to go to Topsham to actually send the goods out. And from there, they could go anywhere in the world. And they were involved in this trade for well over 230 years, probably even longer than that. That's what I've traced so far, but it could be either end of that, could be extended. So from roughly the 1630s to the 1850s. The first record of a fulling mill in Tiverton in Devon was in the year 1225, so a long, long time ago. It's a very significant industry in this part of the world. And for anybody who isn't familiar with what fulling is, it's basically a process which is cleaning wool to make it denser. It's not the same as felt, and it's called fulling. So they mat the fibers through moisture, heat, and friction, and it causes the fabric to shrink, and it just makes it a better fabric to actually work with. Now, when they first started doing this, they used wool which was available locally, and it wasn't particularly good quality wool. It was quite coarse, and they were known as dozens because they were done in dozen yards, or the actual measurement of the cloth that was actually sold, and that's what it was called. And my ancestors, they traded in something called serge, which is a kind of a twill fabric with diagonal lines or ridges on the inner and outer surfaces, which again makes it much stronger and a more pleasant fabric against your skin, I think would be one way to put it. And the picture on the right just gives you a little example of the two different types of fabric. You've got something called kersey on the left and serge on the right. And on the serge, you can definitely see the diagonal lines within the fabric itself. And this came from a site called Exeter Memories. I'm just going to go there and show you some of the things that you can find out on there. So this is talking all about the cloth industry here. So it's a brilliant site and it talks about it for this particular place, but it also gives you a general background of it. And it talks about the woolen markets, the merchants who sold at those markets, and the type of things that they actually sold. And there's also various other different articles here. So again, all the slides are available at the end. Barbara always shares those and the links work within them. So do feel free to go and have a look. It's a really interesting website. So the first person I'm actually going to start talking about is my 9 times great-grandfather. He's a gentleman called John Upcott, and he was born around about 1600. I'm not sure of the date. I do know when he died, 1661, because we've got his will. So he was born in Devon. He married a lady called Johanna Trevitt. So probably Johann, maybe Joanne, Joanna, but that's just how it was spelt in those days. And they got married in 1635 in Clumpton. If you remember, Clumpton was one of the places shown in the parish map earlier on. And they had 3 sons that I found, so William, Nicholas and John, and a daughter, Catherine. There may well be others. So given this is so far back, you're talking the 1630s here, those are the records that I found so far. I need to have another look through his will and see if there are any other people mentioned within that. He was what they could describe as a wealthy clothier. So he was one who he didn't necessarily manufacture, he sold. So he would have had a shop in Tiverton and he would have actually sold his goods from there. And his will is available on a site called the National Archives. I'm just showing you here. So his date is the 4th of November 1661. And this is one of the ones that if you sign in, if you have a National Archives account, which is free, you sign in and you can get this for free. You don't have to pay for any of these wills that are available on here. So it's highly worthwhile actually signing up for a free account on here, and then you can download the wills and have a look at them. Bear in mind, when you get these wills, a lot of the handwriting isn't that easy to read. So you might need to get somebody's help with actually transcribing it. Have a go yourself and see how you get on. So that's the National Archives there. This is what his will looks like. And actually, unfortunately, the copy of his will isn't brilliant. It says, "In the name of God, Amen. I, John Upcott of Emerton in the county of Devon, clothier, being sick of body, but of good mind." And it goes on. But it's not that easy to read, this particular one. So it would take quite a lot of effort to do that. And obviously the quality of this one isn't good either. It's quite pale. So there are sometimes you can find applications on your computer or online where it will actually improve the image quality, and it might well be worthwhile doing that. I did pick out some of the information in this because it was mentioned in the book, the Tiverton Cloth book. And so he died in Emerton, and in his will, he left his combing shop and house to his son, Nicholas, and a share in Hob Horse Fulling Mill to his son, William. So I found both of those bits out from the book, which then made me go and get his will. And then in theory, I can actually hopefully manage to transcribe this. I might actually get someone else to do this. I might have a go and see how I get on and then pass that on to somebody else who I know is very good at doing transcriptions. The Hob Horse Mill itself, so going back to Heritage Gateway here, we've got the details here. So it tells us when the mill was first actually found or created. It says it may have been on the site of one of the 2 mills mentioned in Domesday. So we're talking about going back a long, long way here. Known to have been a fulling mill from at least the 1620s. And in 1622, it was Hobhouse Fulling Mill. 1741, Hobby Horse. Then it was changed to Bridwell Mill, and then St Andrew's Mill, and then Hamlin's Mill. So you can see if you're trying to trace the history of something like that, a site like this is invaluable, because you would probably look for something which would say Hobhouse Mill and you would not necessarily find it. And I actually managed to just locate, I did a Google search, and fortunately, after a bit of tweaking, managed to find this website, which was really, really useful. So on here, it's actually got things like the Ordnance Survey things. So I could actually find it on a map here, and it's got further reading associated with it. And it also says that they found things in the ground there. So bones going back to unknown dates. They've got older things from the 18th century and other things there, pots, pipes, glass vessels, things like that. So very useful to find out information about the mill itself. So we're now going on to another generation here. So this is John Upcott. He was born in 1645 and baptized in Tiverton. And he married a lady called Margaret Thomas in 1666. And they were my 8 times great grandparents. I have 4 children that I know of because I found mentions of people in different wills and things like that. So there was Margaret, who married Robert London. Joan married somebody whose surname was Chisel, and I don't know their first name. And I'm not even sure that that is the spelling of the surname. That's what I found in a few places, but I haven't actually managed to find any record of her marriage or anything. William and Nehemiah. So this is one of those rather unusual names that comes up in the tree here. So there's quite a few of them, and he is my direct ancestor here. So John, again, he was a very successful businessman and everything. In 1688, he was elected the mayor of Tiverton. He was, in 1699, one of the top exporters. He was also a tax commissioner, and a tax commissioner was apparently quite a cushy job for anybody to have, because basically they paid themselves and they chose how the taxes that were collected were spent. And that could literally be anything. They could pay themselves with them, and it's ripe for corruption, I think that one was. And in 1704, jointly controlled 1/3 of Exeter's export trade. That's a massive amount. And in 1709, he started trading with Carolina. So Carolina in America. And the 3 ships that I found out about so far are called the Providence, Charlestown, and later the Neptune. In 1714, he went into partnership with his son William. So he's the one mentioned on the left there. And we'll talk a little bit more about William afterwards. So going to actually trade with Carolina, the Neptune was built in Britain and registered in Exeter in 1717. And he was owned by John and William Upcott. So John and his son William, and Robert London. Anyone remember the Robert London? So if we go back, he's Margaret's husband. So he is the son-in-law. So it's jointly owned by John, his son William, and his son-in-law Robert. And this is an old map that I discovered on a wonderful website of Charlestown before it was renamed Charleston. And looking at the whole map, I have to share this with you. It was wonderful. Look at this. Please do go and explore this. So this is actually just this little part of it, but you can see you've got the rest of the coast here. You've got Florida going around to Mexico, and there's just so much lovely information on here going back to 1711. So please do take a look at that one. And I hadn't come across this before then. So the Charlestown sailed from Topsham, which is the port in Exeter. Remember, Exeter isn't actually on the coast, so they would have actually had a series of either a river or locks. I'm not sure exactly which was in existence at that point. And they went back and forth to Carolina with 1 round trip per year, and they bought back rice, pitch, tar, and deer skins. So those were obviously things which we valued in England and that everyone was selling over in America. So the Charlestown started this, and the Neptune continued this from 1717 to 29. So after 1717, things got a little bit dicey out there for various different reasons. There was attacks of different sorts. So only Upcott and Co. from amongst the Tiverton firms continued to trade with the Carolinas after the War of 1718. And this is the bit Barbara's looking forward to, piracy. So the Neptune arrived in Charlestown, 26th of April, 1718, and she unloaded her European cargo and took on 164 barrels of rice, 525 barrels of pitch, and 263 of tar ready for shipping to Topsham. So they're sitting in the harbour, they're getting everything ready, they're thinking they're going to be going fairly soon. However, this gentleman came along, Edward Teach, aka Blackbeard. He arrived in late May, and he basically wanted supplies for his ships, and he refused to leave until he got those supplies. And basically he ransacked ships, he caused chaos, and the mayor was basically forced to accede to his demands. Once he got what he wanted, he left. Unfortunately, the Neptune wasn't one of the ones that was ransacked. So it survived and departed on the 10th of June, 1718, returning to Topsham in early August. However, it must have been quite an upsetting experience, put it like that, for the captain and the crew, because the master resigned when they got back. He thought, that's it, not doing that again. On the next voyage, we have a gentleman called Peter Seeley. So he's the captain, and it was the only vessel from West Country Port to sail under a letter of marque. So that is something that the government issued, which meant that if you came across an enemy ship, as it were, you could legally take possession and capture that ship and take the goods, and you were allowed to do that. You weren't being a pirate yourself. You had the government's permission to actually do that. And this is a lovely thing here where it says how they actually fortified the ship to make it stronger, so in case they met pirates themselves going forward. So the said Captain Keely, his ship is called the Neptune, is of the burthen of around 150 tons, and the said Peter Seeley goeth captain of her, that she carries 14 guns, 28 men, 30 small arms, 24 cutlasses, 10 barrels of powder, 30 rounds of great shot, and about 20 tons of small shot, 20 hundredweight of small shot. That the said ship is victualled for 6 months, so it's got enough food to last the crew for 6 months, has 2 suites of sails, 6 anchors, 4 cables, and about 100 weight of spare cordage. That Richard Baker goes lieutenant, John Reverd boatswain, William Lacey gunner, John Hayman carpenter, John Lockley cook, and Francis Lux surgeon of the said ship. So it's lovely, you actually know who the crew were of that ship, and I don't think that's particularly common that is actually mentioned. So if anyone's got those ancestors, go and have a look. And that John and William Upcott and Robert Devon of Tiverton, the county of Devon, merchants, are the owners and setters out of the said ship. So on this voyage in 1719, they were taking from England serge, port and canary wine, and I'm just going to move the screen there because it's something, and German linen. So that's evidence of trading with Europe there. So port and canary wine would have come from Portugal, German wine from Germany. And on the way back, we heard this earlier on, rice, pitch and tar and deer skins. The Charleston went the other direction. They actually went out to Europe to trade. So they took pilchards. So the West Country is well known for fish and pilchards, and they brought back Greek raisins. And I just thought it's amazing to actually see the type of things that were traded. Now we come to William Upcott. Now he's the gentleman who featured on the front cover of the Tiverton cloth book. He was baptized in 1677. So he was son of John the Clothier, who was the mayor. He was very wealthy, he was very successful, blah, blah, blah. He was a really good merchant, a good businessman. However, it changed. His character tended towards the showy, the dandy, and even the spendthrift. He inherited a lot of money from his father, but in 1730, one of his customers went bankrupt. In 1731, there was a fire in Tiverton where the properties were not insured, and even though there was a fund for uninsured properties, he chose not to take part in that. In 1731, he erected a large monument in the middle of Tiverton called the Market Cross, and basically it was very unpopular because basically he went bankrupt. In a moment, I'll show you that, and this was seen as a reminder of his misfortune and the fact that lots of people had lost money and everything like that, and so they didn't want it, so it was taken down around 50 years later. And then he decided to do a legal dispute with the mayor of Exeter over custom duties. And these had been paid in a certain way by everybody. And he decided that he didn't like that. He wanted to change it, and he lost. Then he wanted to rebuild his house. So he had chosen a very smart place in Cathedral Yard, so literally right next to the cathedral in Exeter. And he rebuilt his house there and took out some quite large mortgages, so £700 and £2,400, talking about 1677. So that's a lot of money for those days. And then finally, he stood for Parliament. And you had to fund this if you were going to do it yourselves, and it cost a lot of money to do so. So you can see all of those different things there have added up to him spending his money in not the wisest way possible. He took out further mortgages, and in 1736, his creditors had had enough, so they made him bankrupt. He died in 1739, and he's buried in St. Peter's Church in Tiverton. And he actually spent money on having this portrait done. So this was done by quite a well-known portrait artist at the time. So he spent his money on things which weren't ever going to generate him that much money, put it like that. So we're moving forward in time now. So we're going to William Upcott, who was born in 1776. He's my 4 times great uncle. He was born in Columpton, and he was very successful. So it went up and down. So you get very successful people, people who spent a lot of money, people who did very well, and so it went on. And he was the most important clothier in Columpton of his time. He became the prime cloth manufacturer, and he had a place called Shortlands. And he also purchased Culmstock Mill, and he leased Bradfield Mill, and he even bought the town's workhouse to use for cloth production, and he employed the people who were actually living there in his business. And I found a thing here where it actually says about an apprentice record on the Southwest Heritage Trust here. So Henry Westron, who was 9, he was apprenticed to William Upcott for working at Shortlands in 1804. So remember, people started their apprenticeships very early, and they tended to last for sort of 8 to 12 years or so. And William died at home in 1851 in Shortlands. And I found a series of letters that had been written back and forth, and I just wanted to share some of those with you. So, respected friend, Wellington IV, the 9th month, 1824. William Upcott, we are concerned to find by intelligence just received that thy factory in the parish of Bradninch has been destroyed by fire, and supposing it may occasion thee some inconvenience, we write to offer to spin some yarn for thee. So there's a series of letters going back and forth about different occasions. And so it's like Samuel Sparks informs us that a lot of wool received by him, first instance, shrunk 12 pounds in a very short time. We shall therefore be obliged by their answer as to which of the 2 modes proposed to thee thou wouldst prefer. And so you can see these conversations going back and forth on little different things about business, but this is all from the Cold Harbour Mill records. So William had 3 children, and basically they inherited lots of money between them. So his daughter Elizabeth never married, and I found him looking after her looking after him on the census in later records. And then she inherited £6,000. So in those days, that's roughly about £1 million today. So that's £6,000 cash, plus houses. So there's a house called the Shortlands House. So not the mill, not the business, but the house, and various others. And these are actually itemized. And I thought this is lovely because it gives you an idea of what sort of things that William had. I give and bequeath all my furniture, plate, linen, china, glass, books, prints, pictures, musical instruments, wine, liquors, fuel, and other consumable stores and provisions, wearing apparel, and all other household goods and effects whatsoever, of which I shall die possessed, and which shall be in and about my house at Shortlands, or other house where I may be residing at the time of my death, unto my daughter Elizabeth Upcott. Absolutely. I love the mentions of things like musical instruments in that. It makes you wonder what sort of things that he actually had. Might have had a piano or pianola or something like that. And I give and devise all and every of my houses situated in the square within the town and parish of Columpton, aforesaid, and called or known by the name of quants, and now in the several occupations of Henry Hill, Thomas Dodge, and Thomas Bubb as the tenants thereof respectively, together with the gardens, courts, yards, outbuildings, and appurtenances to the same several houses, and every or any of them belonging to and unto the use of my daughter, the said Elizabeth Upcott, her heirs and assigns for ever. So Elizabeth did very well out of this. And I actually got her will recently as well. I got it this afternoon and I was having a look at it. I haven't incorporated it in here. But basically, she left slightly more money. So she left £8,249 in her will. And she gave it to all her nieces and nephews because she'd never married. And she gave her sister-in-law, who was her brother William's widow, £10 to buy something in remembrance of her. And one of her nieces got £1,000, another one got £1,000, and several of them got several £100s, and then their brother John Samuel got the rest of it. So she basically gave her money out to the rest of the family. So her brother William, he inherits part of the clothier's business based at Shortlands and other properties. So this is how it says it in the will. Oh, let's go back one. Hang on a minute. Sorry. So I give and devise all and singular the said before mentioned warehouses, workshops, dye and pound houses, wool lofts, weaving, combing and sorting shops, hereditaments and premises so used by me at Shortlands aforesaid, and all the buildings of every kind used for the purposes of carrying on the woolen trade, namely barn, stables, lofts, row and other sheds for stock, carriages, wagons, carts and other implements, building storerooms, dye houses, washing and air drying lofts, wool lofts for stores, weaving, combing and sorting buildings, stores for wool attending and counting rooms to be used by me at Shortlands for the purposes of my said trade unto and to the use of my said son William Upcott, his heirs and assigns forever. And I thought that's a really good description of all the things that are actually involved in the wool industry. So it's like if you were going to be working in this industry, you needed a lot of property, a heck of a lot of property, and you needed a lot of places to store things as well. Also, he gets the house, cottages, lands and hereditaments following the house at Shortlands with offices and appurtenances, and it goes on and it talks about the different names here. So we've got an orchard called Shortlands Orchard, a field called White Hart, a close of land with portmans or waters, an orchard, a cottage called Waters, a cottage or dwelling house called Dyer's Cottage, 2 gardens, Martin's Gardens, all of those 5 cottages called Frog Pool. And so it goes on. So if I wanted to actually know where these places were, I could probably find them on the map. And it's just a lovely description of everything that he inherited there. And their brother, John Samuel, inherits several properties plus an equal share with his brother William of any properties not named. So obviously William had a lot of properties there. You can see some of them named in that part of it, but there were other ones as well. And John Samuel, his son Charles John, inherited £500 as well. So John Samuel gets a house called Wrights with the gardens, courts, yards, building and appurtenances, and a parcel of land lying close to the turnpike gate of 7 acres. And then he gets Bennett's 3 cottages called Williams or Stonyford, Porter's Lodge. He gets the workhouse. Remember I said that they bought the workhouse to actually use in his business. Cottages attached and situated behind the 3 Mariners pub in Columpton. And so it goes on. Dyers, brick building, and he basically wants the businesses to continue. So he actually says within that the heirs should carry on with the businesses, his sons and grandsons. It's the expectation that they will actually do that. So that was William Upcott, 1776 to 1851. When I was looking through all of this, I've shown you some of the sites I went to. I just wanted to mention some of those again. Tiverton Cloth. So I looked for this one. not very easy to actually find a copy of it. I got it in the museum. It's out of stock at Waterstones at the moment, which is the link I put on there. But if anyone's interested in looking into an industry, it's worthwhile seeing whether someone's actually written a book about that industry and whether you can actually purchase it. Port books. I don't know whether you've ever come across something like this. So basically, the port books are a record of the trade in a particular port. So what that's goods coming in and goods going out. It mentions the name of the ship. It mentions the captain. It mentions what was traded. It mentions when they did it. It mentions the destinations back and forth and things like that. I've looked at those for another reason, for a different project I was doing a while ago. But the National Archives actually has some research guides, which is worthwhile having a look at here. So merchant trade records, port books, 1565 to 1799. And there's lots of different guides on there telling you the sort of things you can find out with that one. I was fortunate to get a family tree done by another relative talking about the Nehemiah Upcott family line, which allowed me to go back and actually link into some of these people. The Devon Family History Society. So obviously there was a lot of information here, which is based in Devon. So I joined this society a while ago, and I will just show you, because they've actually got a really good members area here that you can search records and you can find things like baptisms. So if I just go in here and I type in Upcott William and do a search, there we have lots of different information. So some of these will be mine, some of these older ones that are around Columpton. Some of them may also be mine, and I haven't quite got there yet because the family did spread out and go to different places. So at the moment, I've been focusing on the Columpton and Lympstone people. So for example, I know that this is one of mine here, William, born in 1818. I was looking at him earlier on today, and it actually gives the father's occupation as husbandman on there. In some of these, it will also even give the date of birth if it's actually on the record as well. So this is the sort of thing you can get when you join a family history society. So if you've got ancestors in a particular part of the UK, it's definitely worthwhile joining, and it's not expensive to do so. And generally, it's less than £20 a year. Historic Columpton. So Columpton celebrates the cloth trade, and they've got a lot of information about it. So there's this website here and talks about the different locations. So I mentioned Shortlands. So this is William Upcott. He introduced mechanization, became the main employer in 1830s to 40s. And the site actually doesn't exist anymore, but it's useful to actually find there. And then there's another mention of higher, middle and lower mills by him and the workhouse that he bought. So you can see he was quite significant. And there's lots of things here talking about the different trades, so watch and clock makers, and also old maps and things. So it's worthwhile having a look to see if there are any websites like this around the places you are interested in. The Heritage Gateway with Hobhouse Mill. I won't show you that one. I showed you that one earlier. Januki, that's another site that's very good. If anyone's listened to my podcast, I interviewed one of the founders of Januki a while ago, and he was talking about some of the records that are available. And Devon is actually one of the counties on here where there is a lot of information, a lot more than other counties. So in this instance, this takes you straight through to wills. So the prerogative Port of Canterbury wills from 1661 to 1670. If I go down the bottom here, we've got Upcott John, Clothier, Tiverton, will 1661, and administration in 1663. So that's another clue that the record was there. So I found it on the National Archives website, but I've also found a mention of it on this one as well. And again, that is his will that I was just talking about on the National Archives website. And the Southwest Heritage Trust. So this is another one that's a good one. So you can look at all sorts of different things on here. So this is basically the Devon Archives online. So it's worthwhile having a look at that if you're looking at anything for Devon. And that's it for today. Any questions?
That was fascinating. Thank you, Emma. it's true. I was interested in the whole piracy thing. It also made a good graphic to help promote today's talk. But my brother has a house in the North Carolina Outer Banks area, which, of course, North and South, but at that time were the Carolinas. And the Outer Banks area was historically known as the graveyard of the Atlantic because it is such a dangerous, dangerous coast. South Carolina and what is now Charleston was a far safer harbor to come into, and why it was such a critical harbor for that kind of transatlantic trade. It begs the question, though, so much of the transatlantic trade up to about, I think it was 1808 in the United States anyway, was in human beings, was in slavery. That was coming from Africa to America, then up to Europe and back down again, up to England and then back down again. But maybe 1808 was the year it was abolished in England. Is that right? Something like that.
I can't remember.
For some reason, I remember that date. One of you may know. I'm wondering if in the uncomfortable conversations you had found any of that, or if that was very clearly these three ships going back and forth to the Devon area because of so much of the woolen trade.
I didn't find any mentions of slavery or human people, anything like that as part of it. It literally was just those goods and things like that. And this was that my focus was trade and cloth and things like that. So that was all I was looking for. There was no mention of it in the book that I was reading or any of the records that I found. It is possible that other people were involved in it, but they literally, they didn't go to Africa. They went back and forth from England to the Carolinas, and they went to Europe. So they weren't involved in it with their ships.
Yeah. Well, then the flip side is also true. There was a lot of cotton being generated in the Americas, and wool. Obviously, you were producing the wool and then creating the cloth and sending it back. Was there any of the cotton going up to Europe from here?
Huh. Not that I noticed here. Right. This was literally focused on the wool trade.
Right. So, I was also interested in the reference to serge, and then you talked about it in that twill at the very beginning. I didn't know what serge was. I know what a serger is from a sewing perspective, but serge is, in fact, that twill material, which is really interesting. So I suspect that the wool production was very tailored to that kind of fabric making.
And you'll find in the records that people are known as being serge makers. I found that in several of my ancestors. Actually, they state that it's something important to them, the making of that particular cloth.
Yeah. Just fascinating. Anyone else? Karen, I noticed that you're off your mute. Go ahead, please. Or Jennifer, go ahead.
Yep. Just talking about serge, just reminded me my first work uniform was made out of serge. So it was black serge. I just made me, I hadn't thought about that in years. Yeah. It was very, very smooth, and it was really warm, and it was quite heavy to wear.
And hard wearing, I would think, as well.
Yeah. You didn't replace uniform. Yeah, your uniform did, I was there for a few years, and that uniform lasted me the whole time. Yeah. But I love the detail. I just loved all the detail, in the wheels, and the detail of the trade, the things they were bringing back and forth. I found that really, really interesting to get so much detail about your ancestors. Great.
And just about the industry as well, learning how the industry functions and things, and sort of thinking about all those properties in the wills, and they needed all of those different things that I mentioned, that all of those different buildings. So it went from one to the other, and then it came out at the other end. And you just think of what was involved in doing that: a number of people, the water, the energy, whether it was all done by hand to start with and then mechanized, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. Yeah, thank you for that. It was great. Loved it.
Cynthia, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, I saw, in part of that the buildings from the woolen mill were demolished 1993 or something like that, or 33. Do you know, does the house that passed down through the family, did that survive, that main house?
You know, I don't know. It survived for a while, certainly. I think it's been demolished and it's been built on. If I remember rightly, I looked for that one, and there are various different properties around there, but there's not one big property anymore, I don't think.
I also find it fascinating that all of this, or at least as you've described it, began from a holiday trip in the area and picking up the book.
Yeah.
And then off you go down the rabbit hole to tell these stories. That was only, you say, about a month ago?
Well, if I can go back slightly, it's like I'm very fortunate in that I've got a photograph of Harriet Upcock in the 1850s, probably. She was born around 1770 something. And I've got my great grandfather saying this was his grandmother. And so that was the first Upcott that I knew of. So I knew the name, and then I knew her father was William, and that he was in the clothing trade in Exeter. But I didn't really know a great deal more than that. But I knew there was something. I knew that there was some significance, and there was some cousin Colin had mentioned that there was some trail that was being created or something a while ago, but I didn't realize much more than that until I started researching it for this, and to find how significant they were in the industry. And as I said, I was showing that book to some people earlier on, and I will try and show you it now, but you can, if you look at this, I don't know if you can see this.
Wow.
You see that those are all the references to the family that I found within that book, all of those different notes, those little notes in there. And even I started looking through it and thinking, well, hang on, I never recognized that name as well. So one of my other great grandfathers was a fuller in Taunton. So he was mayor of Taunton in 1720 something, a couple of times. And his wife, her name was Edith Whitmarsh. Her father ran carriages between Taunton and London. And I suddenly saw a mention of Whitmarsh and Company in here. And it's like they were carrying the wagons around the West Country as well. And it's like, and there's another mention of the Bennett family in there as well. So there's not just the Upcotts, there's various other people. And it made me think of how connected people were. So how the towns would have known, the traders in the towns, the significant people in the towns, the merchants and things like that, would have known the significant people in other places. They would have sold goods to them, or they would have bought raw materials from them and things. They would have traded with them. They would have moved things around. And sort of, I think that I'm a descendant of various of these people in lots of different family lines. And they weren't that connected as family in those days, but they were connected by trade in those days.
That is fascinating. That is fascinating. And I love how you've, on a number of your presentations here, have picked up the industry in a given area and then tracked that industry. But here in this one, you've looked at this vertical integration from sheep to ship. Oh, like that. And how, how that then led to really a merchant class that would then trust each other, except for that one guy who was like spending all his money on himself.
The dandy.
Ahead, the dandy.
Okay, I want to ask a question.
Did you have something, Linda?
Yeah, I just want to know, is it certain type of sheep that came from, the wool, or different kinds?
No, there were a certain type of sheep, and I can't remember which one it was, but I know that it was only a particular type of sheep. And I don't think in those days that there were that many, that it would have been very localized. So for certain types of sheep would have only been bred and actually survived in certain areas. So it would have been wool based on the local sheep.
I wonder if it changed over times when there would be new breeds coming.
Yes, I think it probably did. Yeah. And
Mm.
also sort of when they talk about fulling, about processes which can smooth the wool, make it denser, make it easier to work with. And I think that they said at one point some of the wool was quite short, the actual threads in some way, and there were ones which were different. I didn't look into that area in great detail, but I know that there were changes.
Right. Jennifer, when you said about your outfit made from what, when you would wash it, how would you wash it? Cold water, I'm presuming.
Yep, cold water, always by hand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
We were given 2 uniforms when we started, and they took forever in those days. There was no clothes dryers. They took and you wouldn't put it in there anyway.
Wouldn't put it in, no.
They took forever to dry. Yeah. That's to remember. And I just remember how heavy it was, and we wore them in the summer, and
Yeah.
But it was beautiful fabric. It was really lovely fabric to touch.
Sure.
Even though it was strong, it was really soft.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, probably smooth more than soft, really smooth, Yeah.
Okay.
It's lovely.
With that diagonal twill, I'm really wondering if, like, what we know as denim was a cotton version of this kind of serge.
Yeah.
And of course, denim was originally dyed with indigo. And well, that was transformative out here in the West Coast of the Americas, where, in our gold rush, what we know of all the people who sold the picks, axes, and dungarees made the money on the gold. See Levi's. That in the 50s, of course.
Yep.
It's just fascinating, Emma.
Yeah.
You're going to send us all down into our little rabbit holes.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you start looking at a particular branch of the family and the trade that they were involved in, what information is actually available when you start digging.
Yeah.
You can just see a trade in, industrial revolution industries and family heritage, and how many people pick up different sides of it. I'm thinking, of course, of Dean Kirby, and he is a historian, journalist, often talking about the Industrial Revolution in his hometown of Manchester, and 19th century, and everything from the political debates, and eventually a reformation of how workers were cared for and whatnot. Yeah.
I wonder how far back you went. Was it 1600, Emma?
1635 was the earliest that I found for definite. I think it was, and I actually sat there with the book and with a piece of paper and a pencil, and I was drawing little mini family trees. I think it says this person's the son of this one, this one's the son of this one. Okay, and how do they link together? And trying to pull things together and thinking, wait, does that go back further? And sort of doing that from the information in the book there, and then merging that with what I already had. But yeah, I'm fairly sure that you could go back further.
Sheep.
Well, it's interesting because not too many ships were going in the 1600s. No.
So that would be trade within Britain, I would assume.
It could be anywhere. So the port, basically, because the roads and things weren't very good in England in those days, they traded by ship. They took goods and moved around the coast, and they would go from place to place around the coast.
Right.
Or across to Europe and back again.
Right.
They used the rivers in some instances, and things would have been navigable that were different now. So things have silted up now. So towns that were quite close to the coast a few centuries ago now aren't. So all the rivers have silted up. So you need to bear that in mind, that the coastline has changed. So if you look at the coastline in those days and the coastline now, it won't be the same.
Wow. And I guess there wasn't an economic interest in dredging those simply because roads were a viable alternative. Do you think?
In well, no, not even that really. I think the roads in those days, we're talking about them silting up a couple of centuries ago. we're talking about 3 or 4 centuries ago, and they silted up 200 years ago. So people would have found other means of doing it. They would have worked out how to move by pack horse, by carriages, by whatever, on land, shorter distances to get to the ports.
And then also perhaps those same rivers were also not deep enough for enough water generating enough flow through them and so on.
And then after that, they did the canals and things to connect different places.
Right. Wow. Fascinating. Do we have other questions for Emma here? I think we're all just eager to dive into our own family history now and go looking.
Yep.
Well, I want to thank you again, Emma, for another rousing exploration of the stories and the history you find. I think you've set us all on a journey into our own stories to start exploring along with a nifty new set of tools. I think for so many of us who speak this language, we have ancestors dating back and in the same hills, dales, and sheep and barns. And so we're going to be off to explore our own stories. So
and as I said earlier on, look for the local family history society in the area you're interested in. It's a brilliant starting point for any research.
Yeah, I'm off to Yorkshire. About the rest of you. All righty. Hey, we could do a poll by different part. There's an idea. All righty. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And we will look forward to another episode next month. I don't recall the date, but you'll find it all at projectkin.org/events. And I think next month it is on the same 22nd. That doesn't
21st.
sound right. 21st. That's close. And Emma Holdwey keeps the topic for the coming month close to the chest. So stay tuned a week ahead.
I was thinking I might give a sneak peek, because looking at this, I was thinking I might find and do one about interesting wills. Yeah, where I found sort of interesting or different information in wills. It's something that stands out, because I found a few of them. Yeah.
Well, expert advice on how to read wills and where to follow, where to find them, where to follow from there is fascinating. I found myself looking up at least a couple of those words, which, I did not know what an appurtenance was. I did not know what a hereditament was.
Yeah.
But, I guess I can't.
It's a different language.
Yeah, I can't claim to be a native speaker of this language. Merely a colonist. All righty then. Thank you again. And I think everyone will join me in thanking you. And we'll see you again next month. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Emma. Bye-bye.
Before you all disappear, Barbara's aware of this, but just to let you know that I've written an article. It's going into the next edition of Who Do You Think You Are magazine.
Wow.
And it's about Substack. And some of you are going to be mentioned.
Oh, wow.
What fun. So we can check that out and stay tuned. I think we all need to be sure to be tracking you at Journeys into Genealogy. And as always, I will put a little plug in here for that, because certainly Emma has been my font of some of the most incredible introductions and pointers around this wonderful community of experts and genealogists.
Your sound's gone, Barbara.
Oh, doggone it. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Yeah,
You can?
I can hear.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Well, in any case, thank you all. I better quit while I'm ahead, and I'll put all the plugs into the notes as I do, because the Journeys into Genealogy podcast has been just such a wonderful place to learn more while listening to fascinating stories. So again, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.